Vernon Pratt taught the boys at my school in Lorain, Ohio, and most of what he taught never showed up on a report card. He made you stand when he came into the room. He made you take your hat off before you got 2 steps inside the door. He would take your hand to shake it and not let go until your eyes came up off the floor, and if you looked down, he shook it again, slower, until you got it right. We thought it was about manners. What he was really doing was turning a boy into a man you could not talk down to. That kind of teaching was struck out of American schools around 1972, not in a single afternoon and not with those words written on any order, but the framework that drilled boys in how to carry themselves, the boys' half of the old curriculum, came apart in those years, and the men it used to turn out came apart with it. I was in one of the last rooms that got it. The boys 5 years behind me walked out of that same building never having been shown a minute of it. What those men had was a kind of standing that money could not buy and nobody could take away. A fellow with 2 shirts and a rented room could walk into a bank, a union hall, a courtroom, and not be made to feel small. The schools and the courts came to call that old code unequal, and they were not wrong about all of it, which I will come back to. But the label stuck, and the teaching behind it went quiet. Some of what they used to teach you can pick up tomorrow. The handshake at number 23 went out of the schools the year the law changed. The shine shoes at number 9 outlasted it a good while in the homes, and the fathers who held the line one more generation. But the one at the very end, number 1, no school ever managed to teach, and no law ever managed to kill, because it never lived in the hands. It lived somewhere they could not reach. Every habit on this list did the same quiet work. It built a man who took up his rightful space in a room and could not be moved out of it. Here is what they used to teach us. Number 25, he stood up when someone came into the room. A woman, an older man, a stranger in the doorway, it made no difference. Pratt had us on our feet before we had thought about it, and the schools quit drilling the boys in it around 72. You felt it when a man rose for you. You felt, walking in, that you had been expected. Number 24. The hat came off the second he stepped indoors, and again the moment a woman spoke to him, not lowered but off and in his hand. There was a whole etiquette to it, and the school stopped running the boys through any of it after 72. Number 23 is the one I told you was gone by then, the handshake. One grip, firm, held a beat, and your eyes stayed level with his the whole time. A man could read your whole hand in that second, whether you meant it, whether you were afraid of him, whether you were already looking past him for the exit. I watched good men get hired and loud ones sent home on nothing more than how they took another man's hand. Once the law changed in 72 and the boys could not be drilled in what the girls were not, that 1 second of instruction went out of the schools for good. Number 22, he called men sir and women ma'am before they had done one thing to earn it. He gave the respect first, on credit, and let you spend it back down if you turned out not to be worth it. Most of them never spent it down, they rose up to meet it instead. The next one looks like nothing. It was the difference between a man you trusted and one you only tolerated. Number 21, the dry side of the street, the seat out of the wind, the chair with its back to the wall that he liked best for himself. He gave them up without a word and without making a show of it. The trick was the silence around it. Announce it and it becomes a favor you are owed back someday. Done quietly, it is simply the kind of man you are. Number 20, he stood square when he talked to you. You knew a man like this. He did not lean on the door frame or jingle the change in his pocket, and he never once went looking over your shoulder for someone better to talk to. He planted himself and gave you the whole of his attention, and we have mostly forgotten that being on the receiving end of it felt like anything at all. Number 19, he kept his voice down. There were 2 kinds of men on every shop floor, the one who got loud to be heard and the one who stayed quiet and made the room come to him. The loud one wore you out by noon. The quiet one you leaned in for. My father could drop his voice half a notch, and a kitchen full of arguing men would go still to catch what he said next. That last one a man could fake for an afternoon. The next one he could not, because it cost him something every single morning before the sun was up. Number 18, he was early. Cleon Tasker was a millwright on my first crew, and he stood at the gate 10 minutes before the whistle for 30 years, in the rain. In January, it did not matter to him. The young men laughed at him a little, But when the foreman needed one man he could hand the bad jobs and the early shifts to, he never once had to wonder who. Being early was a thing Cleon said about himself every morning before the work even started, and it cost him nothing but the comfort of 10 more minutes. Let me step out of the list for a moment. Picture a man tonight, 50 years old, in an apartment in any city in this country, eating his supper, standing up at the counter, with his phone propped against the sugar bowl. He is not a bad man. He works hard, pays his way, and would help you move on a Sunday. But no one ever stood him in front of another man and showed him how to hold himself, and he can feel the lack of it without having a name for it. He gets talked over in meetings. He gets talked down to by clerks half his age. He goes home most nights with a low, gnawing sense that he is somehow not being taken seriously, and he could not tell you why if you asked him. The habits that would have fixed it were struck out of the rooms that used to hand them down, and nobody ever told him they had been there at all. Number 17, he paid what he owed the day he owed it, or he came to your face and told you why he could not and when he would. None of this ducking around the back of the church to avoid a man he was a little short with. The debt itself was nothing. It was coming to your face about it that counted. If the last one was about keeping faith with another man, this next one was about keeping it with yourself. Number 16, he did not complain about being tired or broke or cold, not in front of other men. Everybody on that floor was all three. Saying it out loud just handed your share of it to the next man to carry on top of his own. So you kept it behind your teeth, and you got to look back from the man beside you that told you he was doing the exact same thing. I will say this one cut both ways though. A man who never says he is hurting is also a man nobody can help. I watched that pride put more than one fellow in an early grave, too stubborn to say his chest had been bothering him for a month. Number 15, and this is the one I have turned over the longest. He could sit with another man in a long silence and feel no need at all to break it. I did not understand it until I was grown. When I was a boy, my father and my Uncle Meade would sit on the back steps after a shift with a bottle of beer each and say maybe 10 words across a whole hour. I thought they had nothing left to say to one another. Years later, I understood it was the opposite. They knew each other so well and trusted the quiet between them so completely that talking would have been a kind of fidgeting. The men who had to fill every silence were the nervous ones, the ones working some angle. A man who could let the quiet just sit there was telling you he had nothing to prove and nowhere he would rather be. Try to find that today. We have built a whole world that panics at 3 seconds of dead air. I have grandsons who cannot ride to the end of the block without reaching for something to look at, and I do not think they have been bored one time in their lives. I think they are missing something, and I do not know how to give it back to them. Number 14, he could take being corrected without flinching and without a speech about it. You told him he had it wrong, he looked at it square, and if you were right, he said so, and that was the end of the matter. No wounded pride, no list of reasons, no going cold for 3 days. Watch what the next one did to a man standing among people he never even spoke to. Number 13, he did not run a man down who was not in the room to answer for himself. If he had something to say about you, you heard it from him and not from somebody else carrying it back across town. A man who will gossip to you will gossip about you, and everybody in earshot does that arithmetic without thinking about it. Number 12, his face did not change for rank. Dewey Hacks ran a floor at the plant, and he spoke to the man pushing the broom in the exact same tone he used on the men down from the front office, and he did it whether or not anybody was there to see. The fellows who went warm for the boss and cold for the help, everybody saw it, and everybody quietly filed them away under men not to be trusted. Number 11, he finished the job, including the part of it that nobody would ever check. He squared off the back of the cabinet that was going to face a wall for 50 years, not because a soul would see it, but because he would know it was there. Let the hidden corners go, and the ones in plain sight start going too. In 1972, Congress passed a law called Title IX. It is remembered now as the reason the girls finally got their own teams and their own locker rooms, and that part of it was good and overdue, but the law reached wider than the ball field. It said no school taking federal money could teach the boys and the girls differently, and in the years right after, The separate boys' curriculum, the deportment, the conduct, the drilling of a boy in how to carry himself had no protected place left to stand. You could not run it for the boys and not for the girls, and nobody sat down and built a version of it for everyone, so it mostly just stopped. And here is where I owe you some honesty, because the men I am describing were not saints, and the old way was not all of it worth keeping. A good deal of what got taught to the girls in those same years was small and stifling, and they were right to want out from under it. The law fixed a real wrong, but it threw out the part that was holding the roof up, and in 50 years nobody has put anything back in the space where it used to be. If any of this is landing with you, subscribe, not for me. So this stays findable for the next man who goes looking for what he lost, and so a few of us who still remember have somewhere to sit together. I put one of these out every week. Here is where the list stops being about how a man stands and starts being about what he is made of. Number 10, his temper ran on a long fuse, not because he could not get angry, but because he had settled a long time before who got to set him off, and the answer came to just about nobody. Every block had one big quiet man nobody had ever seen lose it, and it was precisely because you could feel how much he was holding back that the other men stepped careful around him. The fellow with the short fuse, you manage him, you talk around him, you step lightly. You do not respect him, you just keep from setting him off. The man with the slow fuse, you do not want to be the one who finally finds the end of it. A man who governs himself does not have to be governed by anyone else. Number 9 is the one I said the fathers held on to at home long after the schools let it go. He kept what little he had like it mattered. Old Aldo Renz, a bachelor 2 doors down from us, pressed his one suit and shined his good shoes every Sunday night at the kitchen table, the newspaper laid down to spare the oilcloth. There was no vanity in it. A man who keeps his few things sharp is telling the world he respects himself, and the world has a way of taking a man at the price he sets on himself. Renz set those shoes by the door, toes out, the way he always had, right up to the week he died. Number 8, he could say I was wrong, flat, and not die of it. 3 words most men choke clean on. He did not dress it up, and he did not apologize 4 times over to feel better about it. He said it once, meant it, and moved on. The next one a man could do for nothing, and it bought him more goodwill than money ever did. Number 7, when another man had it wrong, he corrected him quietly, off to the side, where nobody else could hear. He had it in him to make you look a fool in front of the others, and he chose not to every single time. The men who corrected you loud and in the open, to stand an inch taller doing it, you remembered them too, but not in the way they were hoping. Number 6, and this is the one that sat closest to what the schools actually carried off, bearing. The plain way a man moved himself through a room, shoulders set, chin level, an unhurried walk, the hands quiet at his sides, the whole of him saying, I belong here and I am in no hurry to prove it to you. That was taught, that was drilled. Pratt would walk a slouching boy up and down the shop floor in Lorain until the slump came out of his spine, and a coach or a shop man in near every school in the country was doing some version of the same thing to the boys. It was the boys' half of the old curriculum, and it was among the first things to go. You can read it from clear across a parking lot, the difference between a man who was taught to carry himself and a man who was left to work it out alone. The first one you do not crowd. The second one, the world crowds him without even meaning to. Number 5, he could take a joke at his own expense and be the first one laughing at it. The men who could not, who went stiff and cold the second they were the target, taught the whole room to handle them with care, and being handled with care is a quiet way of being held at arm's length. The last few are the ones that cost the most to keep. Number 4, he said less than he knew. He did not empty his whole hand onto the table the minute he met you. He let a question sit unanswered if no answer was owed, and he never narrated his own thinking out loud just to fill the air between you. There is a weight to a man who is plainly carrying more than he is letting on. You lean toward him, you wonder about him. The fellow who tells you everything inside 10 minutes has nothing left in him to find. Number 3, he kept his word on the days when keeping it cost him something. Anybody keeps his word when it is easy. The measure was the day it hurt, the day the better offer came along, or the easier road opened up, and he turned them both down because he had already said he would do the other thing. My grandfather shook hands on the sale of a piece of land in 1958, and the very next week another man offered him near double for it. He sold it at the first price to the first man because his hand had already closed on the deal. I asked him once why he did that. He looked at me the way you would look at a boy who asked why water is wet. A man's word was the one thing he owned outright, he said. The only thing nobody could take off him unless he handed it over himself. Number 2 is the one I told you the men guarded the most carefully, and it is the strangest one of all to explain because at bottom it was a thing they refused to do. He never asked to be respected. He did not demand it or fish around for it, and never once said the words, "Do you know who I am?" He kept no score of slights. He did not need you to tell him that he mattered because he had settled that particular question for himself a long time before he ever met you. And that, more than the hat or the handshake or any of the rest of it, was the thing about him you could not get past. You cannot disrespect a man who is not asking you for his respect in the first place. There is nothing there to withhold. He has already handed himself the only verdict that counts, and you and your opinion of him are just weather going by. Number 1. You came to this looking for a list of habits the schools used to teach and then quit teaching. I have handed you 24 of them, but it was never really a list of habits at all. It was one thing taught 24 different ways. A man decided before he ever walked into the room who he was going to be once he was in it. He settled it with himself alone ahead of time, and then he simply went in and was that man and let the room arrange itself around him however it would. Every other rule on this whole list was just a way of practicing that one. The standing, the silence, the slow fuse, the shined shoes, every bit of it was a man rehearsing the same quiet decision until it became the way he moved through the world. You cannot teach that in an afternoon, and no law was ever able to ban it because it never lived in the hands or the hat or the curriculum. It lived in a decision a man made about himself and went on making every morning of his life. That is the one thing they could not carry off in the men who still had it. Vernon Pratt died the year I turned 40. I drove back to Lorain for it. The shop where he had walked the slouch out of 2 generations of boys had been a storage room for years by then, and the school taught nothing like what he used to teach and had not for a long time. He never knew he was carrying anything. He thought he was just teaching boys to stand up straight and shake a hand and keep their word, the same way somebody had once stood him up straight and taught him the very same things. That was the whole of the secret. There was no program behind it and no philosophy, just one man handing it to the next in a room by example, until a law in a turning world closed the room for good. The men who learned it are mostly gone now, or close to it. What they knew was never set down in any book. It is going into the ground with them, a little more of it every year that passes. Unless one man decides it is worth the knowing again and stands up the next time somebody walks in,